Pope Benedict passes away, and Catholics rewrite history. Hi, I'm Scott.
Hey, I'm Mark. So, what's the problem here?
Okay, well, people shouldn't die, right? No. Okay.
What a jerk.
So,
Those Germans going out and dying on us. I mean, what's the deal with that?
what is the deal? Okay, so let me just do a quick synopsis of my perception of the bigger story of Pope Benedict. Okay, Joseph Ratzinger, born in Germany, 1927. He is the first pope ever who stepped down instead of died in the position, which kind of cemented his place in history for bizarre reasons. Okay, came up through the ranks like anybody else. He was ordained a priest in 1951, made cardinal in 1977, served as the chief theological advisor to Pope John Paul II. Is that like the chief operating officer or the chief technical officer or the chief financial officer?
I'd say it's kind of like the COO. Yeah, Chief Operations Officer.
All right. So let's see. And then in 1981, he took over as the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. And so that's kind of like the guy who says, this is what we officially believe, like it or not. So the only person who supersedes him would be the Pope at that time. He was elected Pope in April 2005 following the death of John Paul II. That all seems well and good, right? I think for most of us who lived through the Pope Benedict era and who remember it well, we tend to remember all the shenanigans that happened during his tenure.
Yeah,
so
that's kind of the unfortunate thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So let me just list those out real quick. He was an outspoken in his anti-LGBTQ stance. The big thing during his tenure was he was associated with attempts to cover up claims of abuse within the church. He was very quick to silence any sort of dissent within the leadership ranks of the Catholic Church. He was very preoccupied with tradition and what I call a regressive approach to ministry, like going back to Latin masses and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can hear like somebody, yelling at their, YouTube screen right now going, okay, so how is this guy different than every other Pope?
Yeah. So, well, I don't know about every other Pope. I'm not that old. Okay. The last thing before I answer that question, and probably to me, the thing that stood out the most is he became known as the German Pope who was set on purifying the church.
Yeah, because
never two words. You don't want those two words ever together.
Yeah, German and purifying.
Yeah.
Or Italian and purifying isn't much better.
Right. In my best George Bush voice, that's bad, very bad. Right. Okay.
So is any of this really making Pope Benedict different than like John Paul II or John Paul I or any other Pope?
Let me say this. I remember John Paul II, and of course, there's our current Pope
Francis,
both of whom are very widely regarded as, like Pope Francis, definitely regarded as more progressive.
Yeah,
more about the practical ways that the church can be a light to the world in terms of charity, in terms of doing things that you and I talk about on a regular basis, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, housing the homeless, right? Pope Francis is very serious about that. Now, Pope John Paul II was alive during a more conservative time, but in his time, he was known as a more progressive pope who was also very much concerned with rehabilitating the image and the mission of the Catholic Church to be less about the theology, less about the exclusiveness, and more about how the Catholic Church can be a source of light and healing in the world around it. So that's what I would say is in a synopsis of the contrast between Pope Benedict and the bookends of popes around him, if that makes sense.
I think it's a great way of summing that up. Yeah.
I mean, the list of things that he was known for kind of speaks for itself. being outspoken on, like, I guess today in 2022, right? It's no big deal. Every Christian pastor is outspoken about being anti-LGBTQ. It seems to be the in thing these days.
Yeah, I mean, like they got to find something to latch on to, and I think when it comes to being in the limelight,
Yeah.
I mean, the Pope is in the limelight because they're the Pope.
Yeah.
So it's not like they didn't even have to really seek it. They're kind of elected there. I mean, because Pope Benedict had said like he didn't really want to be Pope in the first place.
Yeah.
But he became Pope because he was elected and he didn't want to say no.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think that would have been the first person to ever say no to being Pope.
Yeah.
Just kind of like looking at this, it's like, okay, I keep using the word Pope, but we're Protestants.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, what is it that makes paying attention to what the Pope is doing important to us as Protestant Christians?
Whether we like to admit it or not, the Pope is perhaps the single most identifiable Christian in the world.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not, he's like E.F. Hutton. Like when he talks, the Christian world listens. And not just the Christian world. The President of the United States listens, right? The Prime Minister of Israel listens. It doesn't matter who you are. When the Pope speaks, like the Pope is like the president. Like stock markets can rise and fall based on what he says, based on the policies he makes. And so in that sense, it should matter very much to Christians how the Pope feels about anything at any given moment.
Yeah, and I would want to add to that statement is that when the Pope says something that, let's just say, like certain kinds of Christians agree with,
yeah,
and that's not really meant to be nearly as sultry as I guess as it may have sounded, but it's like is that if you have somebody who really wants to hold down an anti-trans line, and the Pope comes out and says, well, trans people are going to hell or whatever. Then, those people are going to latch on to what the Pope says. And then they're going to turn right around and say like, well, the Pope has no authority. He's just a man. He shouldn't be leading the church or some nonsense like that. But he kind of becomes, like he becomes that authority. So when people want to make that also common logical fallacy, that the appeal to authority, the Pope can be that authority too.
Yeah.
And that's, I see the Pope is being used by Protestants and particularly evangelicals as just kind of like he's like a seasoning that we use to like make our message more palatable. Well, the Pope said it, and he can't be all that bad.
Yeah.
So then,
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that kind of leads me now. So then, because I didn't want to say to you like, hey, how does this break the church?
Yeah.
And have somebody say, well, he's a Pope. Who cares? Because like we do take a more worldwide view of the church in this podcast.
Exactly. More holistic for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say the reason why this story is so interesting to me, boy, I just can't talk tonight. My speech apparatus apparently just has decided not to cooperate tonight.
You could say speech apparatus, but you couldn't say mouth.
Right. Yes, exactly right. Nice. Well played, sir. Well played. Okay, so what makes this story interesting to me is not the Pope's, his actual tenure as Pope. What's interesting to me is now that he has passed, if you watch the Christian media and read the Christian headlines, headline after headline after headline, how awesome he was and how much respect he has and how much he did to advance the kingdom and how much he's done for Catholicism and how his teaching and training will be everlasting. They make him sound as if he is like at the right hand of Jesus now, and how much he is loved and respected, when that was not the case at all. He was a big, big, big problem for the Catholic Church and for Catholic leadership because he had undone so much of what was been done and worked so hard on for decades, and that just kind of strikes me at like the whole kind of like rewriting history thing is like, why do we keep doing that?
Because we can, like, we're humans, history is nothing but memories, and it's easy to rewrite any memory.
Yeah. But it's funny to me because so I don't know how many of you viewers out there in YouTube land actually read the comments in YouTube, but a great many of them are something like homosexuality is a sin, and that's just the end of that. And this is wrong, and that's just like Greg Locke is a hero for hunting down witches, and that's the end of that story, you know. And they're all blind to the fact that we are revisionists by nature.
Yeah, we do not look backwards without looking at it through a heavily tinted lens.
Yeah.
You know, we tend to overinflate certain bad events in our past.
Yeah.
And then we tend to make like the deep past idyllic.
Right.
And oftentimes it's a past we never lived. That's the dumb
Exactly.
That's the dumb part. It's like, man, like the 60s seemed like a really great time to be alive. I wasn't alive then. And like, what universe could I ever say anything good about the 1960s, especially in light of, you know, my history books?
Right. Oh, but my grandfather told me stories, so I understand it. Or I've read some books, so I understand it.
Yeah.
Or you know things like that. I've got some like Grateful Dead memorabilia, so like I get it. I get it. You know, we love to think that we get it, even though we've got no clue. And this is like you said. This is like what the 60s or what 60 years ago, right? 60 years ago, and we have no clue. And then we turn around and say, but the Bible, which is, you know, the text of the Bible is written thousands of years ago. We totally get it. We get it. Like there is nothing in this book that we don't understand. We understand all of it.
Yes,
like
because the Bible was written by people who natively spoke English and who were Americans.
Yeah.
That's just the truth.
Yeah, the height of arrogance and pride in modern Christian society, for sure. All right, so let's talk about how this breaks the church. Power and position in the church, any church, is self-reinforcing, and it largely goes unchecked.
Yes, yeah.
Right? People who go to church are trained and conditioned to sit down and shut up and trust the pastor. Like you're the guy who may or may not have been to seminary. You know, you did your stint as the youth pastor. You did your stint as the home group pastor, the executive pastor. You're the senior pastor now. So whatever you say goes. We love you. We trust you. And accountability? Who needs that? You know, a group of advisors and people who will disciple you still, even though you're the senior pastor. Who needs that? And this is something that largely goes unchecked in American church.
Yeah, and I mean, somebody might point out that, you know, the Pope isn't part of the American church. But, you know, when we see, you know, just how little actual oversight there is of the Pope, I mean, like there's some sort of oversight from, you know, the people like immediately beneath him. I mean, that's really undersight, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it. But it's like, he is like that person who they've said, like, this is like the mouthpiece of God on earth.
Right.
You know, it's like, it's kind of a Moses-like figure. Even though like they're going to say he's more like a Peter-like figure. But like, it is that like, you are the person that we turn to like answer the big questions about these things.
Yeah. And I think oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was like, and that's like a place where like, I can understand anybody saying, well, that's a problem. And I think that maybe that does kind of give some people in America the impetus to say like, well, I can be this high voice because I'm not claiming to be the Pope, you know, but they really are elevating themselves to that level. Yeah,
they're effectively CEOs, right? And churches shouldn't have CEOs. Is basically what I'll just say. Okay. Okay. All right. You hear what I'm saying? Okay. All right. Number 2, it reminds us that people will fight tooth and nail to protect the status quo.
Definitely.
You know, like it was Pope Benedict's tenure was a bumpy ride. It was a bumpy ride. And so like the Catholic Church, like the leadership, they went from Pope John Paul II, who may have been too progressive for the conservative leadership at the time. They went through the bumpy ride. And then if the lights came on finally, like ding, like, oh, maybe progressive isn't as bad as we thought it was.
Yeah.
You know, because people actually loved Pope John Paul II. They loved Pope John Paul II.
Yeah. And then like they elected Benedict, who thought that Vatican II was an overreach.
Yeah.
And I don't know of much anybody who thinks that Vatican II represents a real huge change in the Catholic Church.
Right. Yeah. That being, Absolutely. Okay, number 3. This is a modern illustration of how quick and easy revisionist tendencies find their way into the church,
Hmm.
right? Like I said, he literally, was Pope just elected in 2005. I mean, that's less than 2 decades, you
Yeah.
know? So he is still fresh in our memories, and he's barely dead, and everybody is out there rewriting the books of what his tenure as the CEO of the Catholic Church has been.
It's no different than what what we saw with what's her face, Queen of England person,
Queen Elizabeth, yeah.
Elizabeth. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm about to say Victoria. I'm like, no, that's
So
not
I guess
right
you just
one.
lost your. I guess like no knighthood for you.
Oh goodness, no. And we like to do this with famous people.
Yeah.
It's like we like to be like, oh, hey, Martin Luther was great. I mean, never mind, he was a raging anti-Semite for a long period of his life. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, but we love to do this with people when they've passed, and like it's like that like you should never speak ill of the dead sort of value,
Right.
which I never
Yeah.
understood because nobody has a problem speaking ill of Mussolini.
Right.
So what's the
Because
problem?
history is always written by the winners. But just to say that if we can like in a matter of weeks totally rewrite the history of Pope Benedict,
Mhm.
you better believe that it is not beyond anybody's power to rewrite the history of Jesus in 2,000 years.
Oh, I think there's been plenty of that. I mean,
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, like these are people who've been trying to rewrite Christian history. And these are just kind of like the big names, right?
Right, but even like more like I agree with you totally. More to the point, the people who say they know Jesus would disapprove of the LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
They know Jesus would disapprove of anybody who's become homeless and stays homeless, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of where my brain was going.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jesus, who famously hated the homeless.
Yeah, who famously hated the tax collectors and the women of the streets.
Yeah. So this is, I think, a good, I would say summary, but it's more like a giant heaping bucket of what's broken. So how do we fix it then?
Yeah. So first of all, and I don't even know why I have to say this, but here we are. Tell the flippin' truth.
Hell, you say?
Tell the truth at all times for any reason, no matter the cost. Especially when it comes to talking about faith, talking about the ideals of the church, talking about the heart of Jesus, talking about the mission of the kingdom and what it is to bring the kingdom to earth. Tell the truth. Even though it might be embarrassing,
Mhm.
even though it might be financially ruinous to whatever church you're part of, tell the truth. Don't sweep it under the rug. Tell the flippin' truth.
Yeah, I would appreciate that, people in like these positions of authority tell the truth. That'd be a nice thing to see.
That would be really nice. Like, when some sort of assault charge comes up or a money embezzling charge comes up or
Mhm.
whatever that the person gets arrested for, like instead of sweeping it under the rug, you go, yeah, this allegation came up and we're going to look into it. And until we figure out what's going on, this person, we're going to sit them down and we are going to redeem the situation and we are going to do what it takes to get there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess as like a comment on that, I would like to reiterate a caution from, a previous episode that we had where we need to not, lionize people when they do come out and confess that they've done some sort of wrong and be like, look
Right.
how great they're that they've confessed. It's like, yeah, well, that person is still confessed to, pedophilia or sexual assault or any of a number of other like, various crimes of basically fraud and thieving. So it's like,
Yeah.
we have to, as a church, respond positively well to, okay, English words hard.
Words is hard indeed.
Oh.
And then the other thing I want to say, I think to tell the truth is a big one. The other thing I want to say is we just need to break ourselves of the delusion that the people who make it to the top of the food chain in churches, as if that should even exist, actually have any sort of clue of what's happening. Typically what happens in churches is the higher up you go in the organization, the more removed you become
Mhm.
from the everyday lives of the people in your congregation, the people in your community. So when we're looking at these people kind of going, you are so freaking awesome, usually they're not nearly as awesome as you think they are.
Yeah, remember everybody, the cream rises to the top, but
Yeah.
so does the scum.
Oh, yeah. Nice. I think that'll preach.
Yeah, not my words. Just to make it clear, I'm not smart enough to think of things in that way.
Nice. Okay, well, oh my gosh, we're at 22 minutes, so let's get the heck out of
Balls.
here. Oh my gosh. So listen, we are Church is Lame. Mark and I get together every week because we think there are real reasons that the church is becoming less influential in America today. And so we do this podcast, we do this YouTube thing. And so by all means, if you have something to say about revisionist history in the church, we'd love to hear you. Write your comment, give us a thumbs up, hit those clicky buttons to subscribe and notify and all those clicky things. And if you're listening to the podcast, shoot us an email, churcheslamepodcast@gmail.com. And please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts.
And with that, go in peace and serve the Lord.
If you got something out of this episode, would you consider leaving us a super thanks by clicking the button down below? And if you'd like to see more content just like this, check out our Hypocrite Much playlist.